Greetings, everyone. This is Virtuous Roots, where we reclaim virtue to bring it to our home and yours. And I'm Thomas McCuddy.
And I'm Thomas Quackenbush.
And I'm Nick Wiegand. And this is a continuation from what is a biblical worldview to then how do we teach our children what a biblical worldview is. So can you give us a quick synopsis of what a biblical worldview is?
So it's just really how you view a worldview is how you view the world, how you see it. And so the biblical worldview is to have a mind that's informed by Scripture. So that way we see things the way the Bible talks about it, the way God has revealed it. And we're more or less just seeing the world the way God sees it, so we can value what he values, think the way he thinks, and live
act the way he wants us to act.
The way he wants us to
act. It has
act.
to work its way out into actual action. I
Correct.
think that's important. All right, so in Proverbs 22:6 reads, "Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." I think this is probably the best scripture that comes down to how do we teach our children how they should go. And it is all defined by their worldview and how they should act.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the beginning of this is we kind of talked through how we should define our own, or how we should understand what a biblical worldview is. How do we begin to show this to our children?
So I think this is why in spending that time, we need to know the biblical worldview, because one of our principles we use in the ministry is, and we'll say it in the Good American Country version, is you can't give what you ain't got.
Okay.
And so if you don't have it, you can't give it.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to having a biblical worldview, you have to have somewhat of this knowledge. You have to know who God is. You have to know what he said to some degree so you can pass this on.
Yeah.
And so that's why as we grow in the biblical worldview, then to be able to pass this on, to be able to help our children have a love for Scripture, to help them understand how to apply Scripture. So it's not just data. I think this is why we spent a couple summers, we did the Bible drill, which is a popular thing here in the States. The kids during the summer, they would basically learn a Bible verse every week, and they would do this like all summer. And so there were workbooks that went with it. It was this whole big study. They would go into the languages with it, like what these key words were. And it was just kind of, the biggest thing was, though, at the Bible drill, that the kids would go around and recite their memory verse. And they actually have national Bible drills. You can actually go and compete for scholarship money. Like, it was big money too for scholarships. And it was just literally, you're given a verse and you have to state the verse and answer these questions about content. So I am not in any way saying that having lots of knowledge and data is bad. But I think that when that's as far as you go, that is not the biblical worldview. Mm-hmm. That is just gaining biblical data. Now, you can't inform the biblical worldview without the data.
Right. So you have to have it for a foundation. Yeah.
But I think that was even my mom growing up in the 60s talked a lot about that. That was a lot of what I sort of registered. There was a lot of like knowledge about, but it's like if you know what you should do and you don't do it, is it really your worldview? Is that really what you believe?
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens with a lot of believers, is that sometimes we can gather this data, but it doesn't impact. It doesn't affect us. It doesn't play into our everyday lives. Mm-hmm. And any worldview should have, like, rubber meets the road. It should impact how you live.
Right. Yeah.
It's going to determine, like, what you value, why you should act, why you should not act. And I think that's why with instilling this in our children, I think a mistake we make is thinking that it is sufficient that when they have the data, mm-hmm. they know what to do and they can go do it.
Well, I mean, especially if you're talking about what was it called again?
The Bible drill?
The Bible drill.
Mm-hmm.
Most kids are going to get that from their church, right? And the parents aren't even really going to have a whole lot of say in that. So
if churches do that.
Yeah. Well, I think having that data is important. I want to chime in and say, I think one of if you're wondering if you're giving this to your children, I think if you're telling your kids what to do just because you say to do it, I think you're missing the boat on teaching your children what a biblical worldview is. Well, I think a lot of kids ask the question, why? And I have a granddaughter who asks the question, why, to the point where I don't even want to answer it anymore because it's a lot. But I have to remember that is how she's defining who she's becoming. And so I think it's important that when you're questioned by your child, that you inform them why you're making those decisions.
And I think it absolutely. And also, your kids are seeing you in an environment most people don't see you in. Like when you're going through difficulties and frustrations, like your water heater breaks or something happens that causes a lot of stress. How do you respond to that stress? And that, I mean, if you're trusting in the Lord and that's what you're telling them that they ought to be doing, are you demonstrating that when you're faced with different trials or different things going on in your life when no one else is looking but them?
Right.
And because I think one of the greatest things, like the best way to evangelize your children is to embody that life and, show them that you love Jesus all the time, not just in church and compartmentalize your faith in some other way. They're going to see that and they're going to recognize that, well, there's just appropriate places for your faith where, you don't need to apply it at home. That's your own place. And you only have to do that in the public. But I think if you really want to instill this, you want to show them how the biblical worldview governs your life. When you're dealing with a situation, you're making decisions, are you praying? Are you consulting scripture? Are you, taking time to deliberate? Are you doing those things that the Bible is telling us we need to do before we make a decision? And they just watch us.
I think it's got to be more than just watching. I think those are all really good things. But I think we have to take the time to instruct them why we're doing what we're doing.
That's true too. Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's so much of an element of, like, you can watch somebody do something and not understand why they're doing it. I think there's been some times when my kids are going through something and I will actually take the time aside and be like, so why did you make that decision?
Yeah.
And work through not only their decision-making process, but then sometimes I will turn and I say, why do you think I made that decision?
Mm-hmm.
And I will let them examine my thought processes and my motivations as well and inform them why I made the decision, inform them how God was a part of it, inform them why I should do what I did, or even if I made a mistake, why should I not have done that? Like that was my bad. I should not have gone there. I should not have said that thing,
I like also when I'm faced with a difficult situation or something that I want to involve my kids in terms of, like, we're going to pray about this.
Mm-hmm.
And we come together and I'm like, they know the posture, they know like what to do. But when I'm praying, I'm explaining, I'm talking to God. I'm also explaining to them what we need, like, why am I doing this? Why we stop at this moment instead of us just going and making a decision, why we're stopping and having this moment of prayer, asking God for wisdom. I don't possess that wisdom because we're trying to make a decision at the moment. So I'm trying to seek that wisdom. I'm showing them that I'm not just some, omniscient person that knows everything, that I rely heavily on the Lord. And I think that they need to see that they need to see that I'm dependent on him so that they could learn that they need to be dependent on him and it's okay.
Yeah, I don't want anyone to listen to this and miss that. Family prayer, praying together,
Mm-hmm.
depending upon the Lord, not just being a super, not being a private thing, but like sharing that with your family. I think that is going to be probably the number one motivator or number one teaching element that we'll be able to teach these children what a biblical worldview is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also as the kids are growing up, and like we do in our house, we have like family devotion, we have like these moments. But I think also why it's important for parents that the biblical worldview is a part of their thinking, because it's going to come out in those unplanned times.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to come out and be part of regular life. And it's going to impact everything we think and do. So I think that's another reason why, as we teach virtue is taught. We have to do the teaching directly. But virtue is also caught. So there's an element of, in my regular lives, like if I separate, if I compartmentalize, and over here, we're having our family devotion, and it was just super spiritual, but then the language, like the language of the scripture, terminology, the values, they sort of get separated and they don't see that anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's why for me, I don't ever turn it off, but is it truly visible? And like you said, am I joining my kids in with like, this is why we think, this is why
Yeah.
these ideas come into play? So it's for parents, if you're thinking, oh, I never do this. Part of this is why we teach the virtue, because if this is the kind of person you are, this is how you're normally going to act.
Right.
This is your virtue is in many ways a predictor of behavior. That when you have these certain qualities, like when you have faith, hope, and love, which is really where we are in terms of the biblical worldview, those virtues, that if faith, hope, and love, as defined in Scripture, if those are a part of your thinking, if it's a part of who you are, they're going to come out. And it allows you, there's a certain freedom, because I think a lot for myself, I don't ever worry, do my kids know where I stand? Do they know how the Scripture has changed me? I mean, they know my story. They've heard these things. They can track with that. And part of that is also, in my family, I think it might be easier. I work from home. We homeschool. I'm around my kids a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So an encouragement I want to give parents that if you find yourself not being around your children a lot because you've got school, there's practice, there's work, and whatever it is going on, you've got to make those times count.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have to be intentional. And I think that's the encouragement. If that's just where you are in life, and you're like, man, I just don't have a lot of time, you've got to be, you can't just sort of almost just kind of let it flow anymore. You're going to have to engage and realize I need to get the most out of this time to really raise the child, and maybe try to open up. And this is the encouragement I give. If things are just too busy, are there things you can cut? Are there ways that you can find more time around your children? Because I think I never find myself saying, I never regret the time I spent with my kids.
Yeah.
That there's times that even when I sacrifice, like, okay, I got to put this off to the side, I never find myself looking back saying, I wish I'd spent less time with my kids. I wish that I had, I wish I spent more time doing paperwork. No.
So, Thomas, you were saying that spending time with your children, or showing that your children the right worldview and the right attitude and the right walk is important. And Thomas, you were saying that spending time with the children is important. And you did say it needed to be intentional, but I think both of those are important, but I think we have to pull them together, and there has to be the element of teaching that goes with it.
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of counseling, and unfortunately I never get to counsel like the person and their dad, right? It's usually their dad has passed away or whatnot. And a lot of people talk about how they don't know if their dad loved them or they, were proud of them. And I think if I were to counsel the dad at the same time, he would say, my kid knows I love him and knows I'm proud of him. I think there's this element where when we don't say the things that are necessary because we think they don't need to be said, oftentimes they need to be said.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when we act a certain way and live that out for our children are going to grab onto that. But I think there's many lessons lost because we think that it's obvious and they don't need to be said. When we're teaching that and we're spending that intentional time with our children, I think it's important also to talk through these things. In the Army, we did these things called after action reviews. After every mission, whether it was successful or whether it was a failure or there was some sort of mission.
Like a debrief?
Yeah, debrief. It was always called the AAR, after action review. Mm-hmm. And so no matter what happened, we would sit and we would go over the details and say, this was good, this was bad, this is why we did this is what we can do better. And we did it after every mission. When I came into ministry, we did them after every one of my sermons. I made him just kind of dig in on my sermons. I think bringing that concept is what I did with my kids. I brought that concept in with my children, and we would leave something where maybe I did something that I wanted my children to kind of grab onto, or they didn't do something, or I didn't, like anything where we could talk about it after the fact and say, okay, so why did this happen? And actually walk through the scenarios so my children understood my headspace and why I was doing it, or vice versa, I could understand theirs. And it gave me this ability to guide and teach and mentor intentionally with purpose, where I just didn't let a lot of situations that I could use as teaching scenarios. I didn't let them just pass by.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you bring up that you highlight what's good, what's bad, all those things, I think that's another mistake that I've seen from parents is like what I want to encourage parents with is you can use the phrase, let's talk about what happened. Let's talk about this thing. Because parents are like, how do I talk to my kids? Just go up to them and say, hey, I want to talk about this. Let's talk about it. So,
and when they roll their eyes, ignore it and just keep talking.
Well, and there's an element like in our house when they roll the eyes, like, all right, we'll start talking about that. Let's, and so we're going to address that. It's like, that is the wrong way to respond to me. Yeah. It's a wrong way to respond to the mom. Okay. So I think the mistake that I hear and I've seen from parents is the children automatically associate, hey, let's talk about this with, I'm about to gripe at you for the rest of the time.
Right. Yeah.
And so we as parents, again, it goes back to mistakes we make where maybe we focus on the negative too much, or sometimes it can be our own baggage, because even though we have, we have a mind that's being transformed according to good, the good, the true, and the beautiful, according to Scripture, we still have these habits. We still have these hangups, and sometimes we might be overly critical. And that's where we as parents, it goes back to, can we be transformed? And I think the answer is yes. Can we be transformed to be more like Christ, who would often, with the disciples, hey, you guys are doing great. And other times he's like, how can you be so dense? So both options are applicable, and maybe even in a situation to be able to say, well, hey, this was really good, but this was awful. I don't ever want to see that again. Here's why. And I think for parents, that self-reflection, it's not just enough to say, oh, well, we do after-action reviews. We do these debriefs.
Yeah.
But it's more of criticizing sessions. I think that tends to be our default. We live in a world where I think many of us, we may have grown up with a lot of criticism. We grow up, that has been the normal mode of operation. And because it's been almost the way people are, it's like, well, if as long as I'm not saying anything, everything's good.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who have said that.
I worked in an environment where that was written on the wall.
Yeah. And so I think that's why shifting that and changing that is, I think, I forget who, if it was like, I heard this from like elementary school teachers, but they were always like, compliment sandwich. Like you start with something that's good, then you offer the criticism, and you end with what was done well to sort of,
as long as you're being genuine.
That. Correct. Yeah.
And you're not, you're being honest.
Yeah. But that's where it forces us, like maybe we're upset because of something's gone wrong, but I have this conversation with parents. Don't lose sight of the good. Don't let the one thing that has gone wrong overpower, even if it's just one thing that has gone well. That these two things can be held in balance, because this is what we are as people. We are sinful people, but at the same time, Christ redeemed us. And even Paul, he was like, okay, with the Galatians, you boneheads, you have this issue. He's like, but yet you were one of the, there's a lot of vivid imagery in the Galatians. He says, you would have torn out your eyes and given them to me if you could have. Like that kind of imagery. But like, he is mad at them.
Yeah.
And he bounces back and forth between this. And I think that's what it means in many ways to have a biblical worldview. That's how that's how Jesus handled these things.
And that's as us as parents ought to imitate in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things is like, we always think about how do we start these conversations. I mean, that's a difficult thing. It's like, you mentioned earlier about some of the parents that might be doing a lot of like, there's practice, there's this, there's that, there's the activities. There's a lot of time in the car. And I do a lot of debrief sessions in the car with my kids. It's just, they're sitting there. What else are we going to do? And we can be intentional with our time. That seems to be, we're just sitting in a traffic light, but I'm breaking stuff out. And it might not even be it's just talking about what happened in their day. And, I'm a chaplain at the Christian school that they're at. And there's some knucklehead kids that do some knucklehead things that they know about. And so we have our debrief sessions. We're just talking about like, what's going on with that? Why did that happen? Like this is and I'm trying to show them the type of people that they should be spending their time with, but they trust me. They value my opinions. They value my insight. Because I not that I just lord it over them, like, you better value what I say. I treat them with respect. when I make mistakes, I say I'm sorry. Like just showing them the humility, but also recognizing that I'm their dad. And there is a sense where it's my duty to help guide them into the life of, like, to follow after Jesus. And I want to take whatever we're dealing with, whether it be something they did wrong or something they did right, or something that somebody, something that they interacted with. Let's talk about it, and just, you don't have to be perfect there. Just, once you start doing it, it becomes easier and it becomes part of what you do,
Yeah,
and
it's. I think it's important to evaluate situations around them.
yeah.
And I want to go back to the compliment sandwich. Or I read this book by John Maxwell, and affirmation is free, and it's this idea of affirming your children. They're true things. I
Yep.
mean, you're not just making stuff up, but they're
Mhm.
true things. When I'm teaching people evangelism and discipleship, one of the questions I ask them is, why should this person that you're approaching listen to you? And the answer I'm looking for is, well, they shouldn't, because you haven't earned the right
Yeah.
to be heard by them. I think with our children, though, I think every parent can take comfort in the fact that our children adore us until we give them a reason not to. Our children respect us until we give them a reason not to. They
That's a
trust
good-
us until we give them a reason not to. Our children are some of the easiest moldable little pieces of clay that we can possibly have before us. And I think parents can take comfort in that fact.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to work that hard to earn that respect.
And there is this share of, you share DNA, like they're kind of like you, and it's not like you're a foreign object that came
Right.
into your life. There's attributes my wife, and there's attributes as me, and they're kind of combined in different ways with
And
different kids.
And we can lose that respect.
Yeah.
We can lose that, like, we can give that up. But I think as parents hear this and we talk about, show them how they ought to live, spend the time with them, talk to them, like,
Mhm.
bring these things together. A parent may hear this and just be like, that sounds like so much work. It sounds so hard. Well, it kind of is. I mean, spending time affirming your children, constructive criticism, these are hard things to do, but they're things that must be done. But we're starting out with our kids. It just makes it so much easier because they love us.
And there's an element you understand your kids' problems because, in talking about the biblical worldview, I mean, we're born with a sinful nature. And I look at my children and they do the things that I used to do. They would do them in the same way. No one taught them. They've never seen it. Those are my sins in my children. I'm like, original sin is like in our DNA. Like, I mean, it's
crazy.
It's wild. But I mean, the scripture talks about that. And so
Now,
I can
some parents get really angry about seeing their own faults in their children, but
It's like, yeah.
it should be the opposite. You should be less angry and go, "Oh man, I know where they got that."
I'm
from."
just happy my kids aren't as bad as I was.
I think it becomes a guilt issue, but I think it goes back to that biblical worldview informing us as parents that we should have compassion because we know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
And because of that compassion, maybe if, like in my own case, if I didn't have that guidance when I was younger and I really needed that, that's a gift I can give my kids that I wish I'd had, and that they don't have to walk the path I walked.
Make all the mistakes we made. And,
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I appreciate the conversation as always. You can find us at familiesofvirtue.com and our podcast Virtuous Roots on all major streaming platforms. Be blessed, and we'll talk to you next time.